Alright, this is my first YouTube video for the series Liberty Through Paint. I'm going to explore a lot of different concepts, and today's is going to be minimum wage and my beliefs in minimum wage being that it really stifles the American economy. And this has a lot to do with, the quote they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So it's not. I don't necessarily blame people for the attractiveness of setting a minimum wage and how appealing it is to support politicians who believe in a minimum wage. Of course, this might upset people to hear, but hopefully they'll approach this video with an open mind, and maybe they won't agree with it, but maybe they can pick up on a couple of my beliefs. And if not, I'm always open to communication, so leave a comment down below, and I would be more than glad to talk to you about this. I definitely encourage everybody to have an open mind when it comes to the way our country is run. So let's essentially go over what minimum wage is and what it means to American business. So essentially, minimum wage is a federal mandate. Um, and we can say here, wrong tool, 1 second. Let's pretend for a second, that this is a federal building. It's not the best, but we'll just say it is. Here's the columns. Okay. Okay. So here we go. This is a federal building, Washington, D.C. And we'll say over here is going to be a factory. Okay. Here's the little Germans. So before, as a capitalist country, we encourage competition, and businesses were kind of a hands-off kind of thing. A lot of people believed in a policy called laissez-faire, which is essentially we should leave the markets to be free and to innovate and fix themselves. I'm a heavy supporter of a free market myself, so I'm going to be a little bit biased on this opinion. There's many other YouTube videos that share opposite opinions, if that's your cup of tea. But that's the approach I'm going to take to this. So this factory, let's say, employs a good amount of people, 30, 40 people. And these people before could be paid at the rate that the company believes they should be paid, or that they can haggle their way up to, and it won't really affect it too much. Any kind of policies are not really in place to affect their choice of the wage that these people are going to be paid. So along comes a federal mandate, which is essentially something that these businesses have to comply to. So the federal government comes over and says, you cannot pay these people, and I believe right now the minimum wage is $7.50. You must pay these people $7.50 an hour. And this applies to all workers. You cannot get around this unless it is a tipped position, and that has its own, which hovers around, I believe, $3.50 right now. And so this business now, whatever its costs were before, so we can do this as simple little algebra. Let's say that this company before had X gross revenue, which is, it's just essentially, this is going to be all the money that this company made. We're going to avoid a lot of things here. Yes, there's a lot of taxes and there's a bunch of different costs that are going to come into place, but for just the sake of getting the message across, we're going to ignore a lot of that, and there's going to be a lot of people who say, well, that's going to make a lot of the difference, but stick in there. We're going through the basic concept here. So they take the amount of money they make in the whole year, they minus their losses, which will be L, and of course this very simple formula here we're going to do, and that's going to be their profit, which we're just going to draw as a green money sign. Profit is the purpose of any business, so when this comes into play, you're going to see that losses are going to grow. So maybe this formula will become x minus L, but maybe L is going to grow by 2 times the cost that it was going to be before. So what's going to happen here? Well, either this money, this profit earned, is going to have to be less, right? Because they're going to have to spend more money, and they're going to, let's say they continue their pattern of making the same exact money, or they're going to have to make twice as much money to make up for the twice as much in cost. But if we're saying that's with the same employees, that's going to be a lot harder to do than to say. They're going to have to increase efficiency by 100% effectively to come away with the same profits. Or, quite frankly, and which is the reality and what happened a lot, this profit recorded by the company is going to diminish. Now, this is not necessarily the case in all businesses, but you can see this is all common sense. We're not using anything complicated. This is what's going to happen and has been happening. So, with that in mind, we can turn to, there's a lot of reasons why this minimum wage is not a fix-all, cure-all, even though it seems an attractive option to people who aren't necessarily wealthy themselves. The first problem that people have with the minimum wage is because you take a place like, let's say it's New York, where the cost of living is seen by many as being outrageous. We'll just pretend this is New York for now. And you say everybody in New York, unless their state laws differing, we're going by the federal version here, the 750. Everybody in New York has to make at least $7.50 an hour, excluding tip positions. Meanwhile, a place like, I don't know, it could be anywhere. Middle of the country, let's say a place like Idaho, and this is supposed to be a attempt at one of those rural windmills, and you take a place that is just really low cost of living, and you say that this place is also going to have to pay $7.50. Now, if the federal minimum wage was set in place originally to make it so that people will be able to pay their bills, and that was the thinking behind it, why are we effectively making a place where it costs a whole lot less to live, maybe rent's only $200 a month in Idaho here, I don't know if that's the case, I'm just making an example, and maybe rent is $1,900 in New York, it doesn't really make sense for them both to be making $7.50. Another thing, and this is perhaps, considered one of the biggest downfalls with it, is it really can be seen as promoting small businesses to not be innovative. And it leaves kind of innovation to the big companies that can take the risk of paying for labor. Because a small business starting out, I mean, you got see where they're gonna have to take loans, and the budgets are always really tight for these starting out businesses unless they come from money already. So when they only can pay one person because the minimum wage is set too high for them, let's just say, that business will not expand as quickly as a business that can take a higher risk and maybe hire two people and have twice the reach to the community that the business with one person could have simply off of labor. And even if this business had, let's say this business came up with this is the best cheeseburger in town, and it's truly a beautiful product and people really enjoy eating it, but combined with all the other costs, this business cannot stay afloat. This business who can take up the cost can usually make it past the first year, even if they have an inferior product. And they say, most businesses, 90% of all businesses will fail in the first year. So a lot of it is just a hurdle to overcome that. And as name recognition builds, they can slowly get back their losses. And this can be seen as just a fact of labor. And we're not necessarily saying this business has a bad product, but through simply labor, you can trample the innovative products. And on a hamburger level, this may not seem so important, but this greatly intensifies when you're talking about new technologies, maybe medical equipment, new battery, new energy devices, things of that nature. So that's definitely innovation can be trampled by the minimum wage. Another problem we see is there's also this tendency, and I'm pretty confident that any teenager, or maybe somebody who was unable to continue their education will definitely know that the early years of their working careers, most jobs that they're going to be offered is going to be set at a minimum wage, and it's almost like an unspoken rule that anything above that is really rare. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen, but it's just really rare. So we see a problem where this wage is offered, and there's little to no haggle room for it. They meet the federal mandate, and as far as they're concerned, they're offering you unskilled labor, and especially in times like we see now with unemployment running so rampant, this is attractive to many people. And we see with minimum wage, there's often it's called setting and leaving, where this 750 is basically set and it's never going to be talked about again. We're just going to close this up, and this position remains a 750 position, because by doing the minimum wage job, we are sorting jobs into their pay bracket, not necessarily the input of the employee. For instance, a gentleman who works at a burger place will generally make the $7.50 an hour running the cashier, the cash register, or flipping burgers in the back, and his position is not really going to ever have a chance to make more than $7.50 because that's what it was open up to, and it's set in stone. There's no haggling there. And not to say this couldn't happen without federal minimum wage, but we see this happening a lot now. Where before, maybe this gentleman is extremely well at, flipping burgers or running the cash register and can do the work of two people. But we see oftentimes, I don't know about you, but there's not too many people who flip burgers at the 15 an hour, which would be what he would get paid if he was doing two people's jobs. Or maybe a little bit less. Maybe he doesn't have as much haggling room. But you can see where efficiency is not rewarded when you have this setting and leaving in place policy. Like I said, this is not all businesses follow this, but we see it's a trend when you have such a basically a standard of wage. So, we see the necessity here for the businesses to have to come up through extreme cases to match the minimum wage. We see the obviously unjust setting of the minimum wage to be equal at very disproportionate cost across the country. We used the example New York and Idaho here. We see how it can stifle innovation between companies who maybe can't afford minimum wage but could grow off of a good product. And we see the influence it has on wage stagnation, whereas the wages are not going to grow for those lower entry positions. But there's really one more thing. There's two things, but there's really one more thing that we can talk about when it comes down to what this company will do in this situation. Because you can remember how I was saying that it will need to cut losses in other places, which is not very easy. I imagine those losses would have been cut already to increase the profits beforehand. Or they're going to either have to raise the cost by 2 of whatever they're selling, which is also not necessarily going to be possible. And it doesn't have to be quite as high as 2, but just enough to make the profit equal to match up for the 2 times their loss in employment. But more often, they're really going to look for efficiency. And there's not much more efficiency they can crank out of their already employed individuals. They might be able to do it out of robots, as you see is the trend now. A lot of car making companies will make their factories robotic. But the simplest solution for them, and this is what you hear a lot of, outsourcing. So this company has a lot of motivation to say, you know what, this wage makes my product very uncompetitive. I have to price it twice as much as a company selling it from another country. Why don't I just take my factory and move it overseas? And I don't know, we'll move it to some little island in Asia. And they'll make it there, and maybe I can actually decrease my losses, and maybe I'll only have half as much losses as I even had originally, let alone the extended. And through doing this, they see their profits jump. Their profits are going to get huge, and they have less government intrusion into their business. And you're going to ask me, why is that so compelling to have less government intrusion in their business? Well, I'm not saying all government intrusion is bad, but for the most part, this business wants investors. So if investors see that the government has a pattern of tinkering with laws that affect their cost, it's very hard for investors to want to invest in a company that stays put in a country that makes their business unstable. Because while maybe this company is profitable selling potato chips at $1, if prices raise of the labor because of the minimum wage, these potato chips are going to have to be priced higher, let's say $1.25. And maybe that will decrease their profits, as maybe there's 1/3 less people will buy potato chips at $1.25. So less profits is going to be less dividends to the shareholders. So this company maybe will get skipped over when investors are looking for companies to invest in. which is definitely going to stifle this company even more, because where are they going to get the capital to increase their efficiency? Because they can't hire more people, which would just increase the problem. They really would have had to go for capital, which is the robots, or maybe a better assembly line, maybe better flowing parts. These are all things that they would need heavy capital to invest in first, and they're not going to find very many people that want to invest in a company that is not going to have a solid track record going forward. So they come over here, and they're very, this is what they originally hoped to do over here. And they see these people are accustomed to a lower standard of living. They don't even have to be paid as much. The costs are lower there. There's less government intrusion in the free markets there. So now you have disproportionate areas. You have innovation being held back, and you have wages being held back, and you have less investment in America. But there's one more thing, and this is a lot of talk is kind of avoided when it comes to this subject. But if minimum wage were to not exist, I'm not sure how plausible that is with how strongly people feel about it. Certainly, not many people who agree with it now can recall a time when it didn't exist. But America thrived way long before there was a minimum wage in place. But one thing that would happen if this minimum wage was not in place is that the border hopping of illegal immigrants into the United States would slow down. And why is that? Well, for instance, we could take Mexican immigrants here. We'll use them as the example. Well, if there's companies here that were looking to somehow fix this formula by lowering these costs, which is not an option I presented before, because we were talking about a very law-abiding factory here, they would have to look for somebody who's either going to work under the table or accept less money, which is going to have to be under the table as well, because this is a federal mandate. These companies could get a lot of fines and possibly go out of business for not doing this. So a lot of the people willing to work under that are people who come from areas such as this island in Asia or this Mexico, where the cost of living is lower, and they're going to want to come over because they see job opportunities. And this stems from businesses needing to have lower costs than the minimum wage. This is not a problem of these immigrants per se. Yes, they're committing an illegal act crossing the border. I cannot sympathize with them there. It's very illegal. It's not a good way to start your presence in this country. Everybody should go about it the legal way, file papers. But this problem, the source of here is not these immigrants. The source problem is businesses who cannot increase their efficiency, cannot increase their costs, and keep the same profits and make the shareholders happy. Many of these shareholders are citizens of the United States. So they do what they can to lower their loss on employment. They're going to hire, let's say, a Mexican immigrant to do the same job at $1 an hour. But if we had not ever had this, maybe he would be able to hire an American at that $1. And that sounds bad at first, but that's a job. There's many people without jobs now earning nothing. There's many people who can't even get unemployment benefits right now. So this is money that could be kept in our economy, and many immigrants will come here, work, and not all of them, some want to stay here, but will come and leave back into Mexico, but this time bring with them money earned here. Many also stay and send money to Mexico. This is money leaving our system, which could have been American. This money would have been spent in America, effectively raising the profits of these companies who are employing only Americans because they have no motivation to leave and pay people in another country and then have to ship those same products back to America. That's an extra cost. So the whole hiring of illegal immigrants would be less appealing, and there would be a lot more jobs. The minimum wage promotes unemployment in and of itself. So you can see my beliefs on minimum wage. I laid them all out. If anybody has any comments, please leave them below. I can't say I'll be able to reply to everybody, but I definitely look forward to an open and logical conversation. And if this kind of stuff interests you, please subscribe, and look forward to more videos from Liberty Through Paint. Bye.